Hello and welcome to Inside the Process. It's Wednesday evening, whatever date it is, the 19th perhaps. I did put it on the post, hopefully I got it right. So we do this every Wednesday night. I'm back to using my phone because there is an issue with the laptop, and apparently it's more inclined for perhaps a number of reasons to use a little more bandwidth, and I have no bandwidth to spare. And actually, having said that, I need to do something important, and I apologize. I need to take my laptop offline. So sorry for walking away. That's how slow my laptop is and how long it took me to turn it off. All right, so I'm readjusting. I'm not going to be able to see comments. I'm not going to be able to just make sure everything's going all right. I'll look at the comments later. So I've opened up my text messages again, and I just realized, and I should have done this before, that I need to take this offline as well. So let's do that. And then we're going to okay, we're good. And we're going to tackle a topic that I've called On the Record. And that could mean a couple of different things, but you probably guess I'm talking about recordings and the recording process. Of course, we don't call it anymore making a record. We did when I started, and that's going to be part of this. But what inspired me to do this tonight is how busy I am right now in the process of recording. So I have said before, without really describing it too much, that this is a super busy, crazy time, and some of the things will be revealed later. So what the pandemic allowed me to do was invest time not only in my own practicing, but in other projects. And they just all, and it wasn't planned this way, but they all started blooming all at once. And so I've got 4 recording projects, actually more, but 4 that are active. And now all pretty much happening at the same time. In addition, now the gig's coming back, and I have some really exciting news. Can't share yet, but performances are coming back, and the landscape is looking very promising. But with these 4 projects, I've gotten myself, of course, in the recording space. And so I want to share that with you, especially if the idea is new to you and you wonder what goes on. And the answer to what goes on really depends in large part on what it is you're recording and what your goals are. So I'm going to take the 4 projects and I'll name them. One is another solo project, to follow up Keeping a Hand in This and That and the Other Thing, which I think is like 1.5 years or 2 years old now. And I'm partway done it. And another project will be an EP probably with Sharon, Sable. We have the recording date scheduled in just a couple of weeks for the Blossom Deery tribute project that we're doing. Did I say Blossom Deery? My mind is spinning. And that's going to be a different thing. As I describe these 4 projects to you, you'll get a sense of like how this is all constructed. I think I have it organized reasonably well. Yeah, famous last words. And then my friend Beth McDonald, a wonderful singer-songwriter, is doing a project of all originals, and that's going to be its own thing. And then finally, I am involved heavily in a recording of a local artist, Karen Somerville. And that's a big project with lots of moving parts and lots of things. And also a much more expensive project, but that's when you need to get funding. And we'll perhaps talk about all that too. So, let's talk about just recording solo piano. What am I doing here? I'm recording solo piano. And even with the phone, it's reasonably okay. You know, the audio quality is okay, but from a real technical, like what's possible standpoint, no. But you can't tell the difference if you're not really discerning or listening, you know what to listen to, particularly if you have not good equipment that you're listening on. If you're listening on good equipment, you can really tell the difference. And I had an interesting discussion with somebody not long ago who insisted that recording with your phone or streaming with your phone is just as good as whatever mics and whatever setup you have. And I won't go into that, but this person did not know. That's a whole nother subject, by the way. You know, humility in the face of what we don't know, which is most everything. And that has a lot to do with our relationship to music. You can tell I'm spaced here. So, what I'm going to do, since I'm jumping off of my last solo recording project, is I'm going to play a tune from it. And this is a tune from that project that at least some people roll their eyes as soon as I start playing it. But it's fun. I like to play it. It goes kind of like this. To a silly start, everything is normal. All right, so the first part about recording is finding a recording studio. Nowadays, there are options galore, including do-it-yourself options. But in order to do a really thorough and appropriate recording project, you need to spend money on equipment. And if you're going to do it yourself, it's going to be a very, very serious hobby. And it is possible to engineer your own recording sessions. I have been in groups where musicians in the group have done that. But typically, you want to go to a recording studio. And I have a unique dilemma in that I require a piano. And quite frankly, if I'm going to record, I'm going to want a piano much better than I own. Because at that level, you're putting that out there. You know, and of course I can. If that weren't possible, that'd be fine. But the culture has moved on from acoustic pianos. And this is something that I kind of touched on before in the previous stream, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And as such, popular culture, I mean, acoustic instruments in general, save drums, but drums are largely electronic in a lot of applications as well. But acoustic instruments in general are not at the center of popular culture. What is the digital keyboard, the synthesizer that I can't say. Or in old days you would say electric piano, but we mean much more than that now. Because a lot of current music is done digitally, if not all digitally. And that's the realm I'm never going to get in. So that's not my process. My process is to find an acoustic piano. And that has really, really limited the places where I can record. And the other thing is that you want to have a good relationship with that piano. Pianists don't get to bring their instrument wherever they go. And some pianos are more user-friendly than others, and depending on the temperament or the approach of the musician, what's user-friendly to one may not be to another. Now I'll tell you, I played, I'll name the place, the Blue House Productions video studio. If you watched the live stream with Beth McDonald a few weeks ago in Scott Seward, it was from there. Also one we did with the Shobert Shires a few months before. Now I've been involved with other projects with Blue House, including a couple of the ones that I'm doing, but that's a separate audio studio with a really nice Steinway. But this Yamaha that I didn't think I was going to like, by the second stream I'm realizing, man, that is letting me do whatever I want to do, and it's supporting it. And it's not because it's necessarily easy to play, but because it's so good. It's such a good instrument. So that might be a piano that I look at. For a few years, the house engineer at the Grand Opera House in Wilmington, that's been a long time. He's since moved away. It's been many years. But he could use that facility for recording. And he had like a 9-foot Baldwin and a 9-foot Steinway. And if you don't know, the longer the strings, of course, the richer, the beautiful, the better the piano. And a 9-foot piano is like cool, right? And I got my choice between the two, and I recorded there as long as I could, which wasn't very long, but both my Christmas CDs are done there, and that's my favorite sound I've ever gotten in a recording. The other thing is, if you're going to go to the very small percentage of studios that have really top equipment, which would include like an investment in a high-end piano. And if they have a high-end piano, they have a lot of other cool toys and stuff as well. You're going to be spending at least twice as much, if not 3 times as much, as if you go into, let's say, somebody who's thoroughly capable and has decent equipment, somebody's like garage studio. No piano, I have to bring a keyboard. So the arrangement I have now is I have a friend who's a piano tuner, a piano technician, who has a really, really nice Mason & Hamlin Grand, and allows me to come there and bring a mobile engineer over. That's how I recorded the last album, and that's how I'm going to record this one. And that's much more affordable. And I'm also among friends, and that's another thing when you're making music, there's a social component to this. So last night, you didn't know this. Well, you kind of guessed that there were other people here. I'm having some work done on my house, and maybe in a month or so, I'll be able to have a reasonable group of people here when I live stream, and I'm looking forward to that. But I had a few people that could fit right now, and eventually I'll just not come out of the closet. I will be open about it. There are people here and all that. Well, I just did it, didn't I? But music is a social, interactive thing, and I'll tell you, as much as I appreciate being able to play in the live streams, and I know you're out there, having that energy in the room, even if it was 4 people, it's like, oh my goodness, all right? That complicates recordings as well. But the first point I wanted to make is I kind of go all over the place. Nothing new. Is that, for me, the biggest deal and the one that nixes 90 to 95% of the possibilities is the need for a good acoustic piano. I will take another stream and talk about why an acoustic piano over a keyboard. And it really depends on, well, yes, it depends on a lot of things. So I'll leave that open. So, unlike the typical contemporary player, I'm not the keyboard man. I'm the piano man, even if I don't sing you a song. Always the acoustic piano for me. There are times, of course, in performance where you have to play a keyboard, but it'll never be on a studio recording. Actually, you should never say never. Oops. All right, so in terms of recording, the number I think I have on my website bio right now is that I've appeared on over 30 album recordings, a fair percentage of them my own, less than half, but then on recordings of other artists, all independent recordings. So there's like no big famous thing that I'm on, but the recording process is just an ongoing thing. It's like documenting a point in time, as you go forward. But I haven't actually counted them in a while, and especially with the 4 going on now, and it was, who knows what the number was over 30. I should update that number to 35 or more. I guess it sounds good. But it does mean that I'm comfortable in recording studio, more or less, and I have some understanding of the things that go on. So beyond recording solo piano, which is really simple and the most inexpensive way, because you don't really have to chew up a lot of studio time. You do everything once. You might have multiple takes of something, but once you have a take of something, at least for me on piano, you're not going to manipulate it. You're not going to take any extra time playing with it. And then when I accumulate enough takes of it, it's really just a matter of getting them all to have the same sound quality, and then putting them together. That is the absolute most basic, simple, and I'm spoiled rotten to be able to put out recordings that way. So let's go to the next project that I mentioned, the Blossom Deery Tribute project with Sharon Sable. This is still a relatively new project, and Sharon wanted to get it off the ground last year. COVID got in the way, but we were able to spend a lot of time getting this show ready. And you may have watched our stream on the Mainstay, and there will certainly be other things. But now we're talking about recording 2 things at once, and this is an important thing to bring up, which is called, and I'm looking just to see what I decided to call it here. Okay, well, sound separation or vocal isolation. And this is something that distinguishes the technology of modern recording from, say, the early big band era, where you kind of just threw up a mic in the middle of everything. And if you had a singer, the singer walked up close to the mic, and what you did was what you did. Now, whether or not you're a musician or even have any connection with the music business or anything, I'm sure you've aware of the idea that there's lots of magic that you can do in a recording studio to make something sound good that may not have been good prior. And one of the things is what they call auto-tune, which is something, if I were to sing, I would absolutely need, but I'm not a singer. And there's so much engineering going on with modern recordings. It's absolutely nothing like the earlier recordings, where whatever you did and whatever mistake you made was going to be captured. And I realize this is not a completely broad blanket statement, but a friend of mine used to say, and there's some truth to it, back in the day when you had to have talent to be in show business. Because anybody who was recording was subject to that, performance level, can't fix, can't do anything. Now, I'm not talking about that with Sharon. What I'm bringing up is that when you record, let's say, me accompanying a vocalist, that vocalist is going to be in another room or a booth, an isolation booth. And what that does is that allows my sound to be separate and her sound, or let's say it's an instrumentalist, their sound to be separate. So now you have options, whether you use them or not. Because if there was bleed over, which is what we call it, if, let's say, Sharon was in my mic or I was in Sharon's mic, then you couldn't go in and make any repairs or adjustments or tweaks or change your mind about things because everything's just all kind of cross-contaminated. And this multi-track thing, I don't know a lot of the history. I know it was in the late 1940s, and Les Paul, the guitarist, had a lot to do with that. To some extent, he's credited as the inventor, but I was looking up at it. It's more complicated than that. This idea of sound separation is important if you need help. That would be me. Well, hopefully not playing the piano as much. But I'll tell you a funny story. And this is not about singing. This is about, well, I'll tell you. So in 2005, the Deery brothers and I did a trio recording. It was our 30-year reunion project, right? I have been in and out of their band ever since we were in high school. You know, we do our own thing, and we our paths cross, and then they don't, and then they do. And I had been out of their band for a while, and they invited me to come back and do their festivals. But one of the situations was that at the time, the trumpet player was not going to be available to travel. And the thing that I could sort of do, emphasize sort of, was play trumpet. That was my double in high school. I got no chops, never had chops, but hadn't touched the thing for years. So I started, you know, working it up. And that way, because they had arrangements for their band that had trumpet parts, and that way those arrangements could still be played. So in this reunion project for Joe Paul and I got the idea, well, since I'm going to be playing trumpet, spoiler alert, I never did. I gave up on it and said, guys, it ain't happening. But when we thought it was happening, I said, let me leave some space in one tune, and let's record me taking a solo on my cornet. Right? And that was the only thing we multi-tracked, because we had to. Now, back when we were kids, 17 years old, you know, whatever, yes, I would do this. I would play, you know, left hand, and I played trumpet in the right hand. It was a bit of a shtick. No. And ain't happening now. But it kind of just isn't happening, period. So what I'll have to say about my trumpet solo that we patched in after the fact, thank God for auto-tune. It would have never worked. It actually sounds decent. This is not a recording that is digitized, I'm pretty sure. So you can't find it anywhere, and I think it was just one printing, so there's probably not many copies of it left. So I can't direct you to hear it. Some of these recordings, like Keeping a Hand and this and that and the other thing, is something that's on the streaming platforms. And what I like to do is just go to YouTube, and YouTube will make individual music video posts with just the album cover there. And I'm going to refer you to a couple of things as we go. So yeah, I've taken advantage of auto-tune and sound separation. I'm not proud of it, but it was just amusing and fun. And just for a second, I'm going to play or a few seconds, I'm going to play the tune that I played on trumpet. a little bit of If I Had You. Okay, so let's go on. And if I talk about Beth McDonald's upcoming release, that gives me a chance to talk about like the next level of complexity, which should be not just sound separation, but the ability to multi-track and add layers of things. And this is something that Beth absolutely loves to do, which is sing harmony. But Beth will tell you if she were here, she'd rather be singing harmony than up in front singing lead. And, you know, happy accompanying, even if that would mean, you know, I didn't play solo. I mean, I don't want to not play solo, but it's like if I had to choose one, I'm really happy accompanying. And Beth loves singing harmony. So if you watch a singer on stage, especially like, you know, the big famous singers, backup singers behind them, right? You know, 2 or 3 or 4, right? But because of recording technology and sound separation, you can actually sort of hologram yourself. And this is what Beth does. So in some of Beth's recordings, you could be hearing 4 of her. And because she's the one singing, she amazingly just matches her phrasing, and it's just, it's extremely, extremely tight. And it's just done over and over again. Now, you can't do that live, but it is an important part of what happens in the recording studio. Because the idea of sound separation and multi-tracking allows you to have, shall I say, an unlimited number of channels. At some point, you know, there's going to be a limit, but I don't know that anybody's ever needed any more channels or tracks for a recording than could be possible. I would be pretty certain of that. So one time that I took advantage of that, and it's something I don't like to do, and it's a bit of a pride thing, which is when I run left-hand bass on the keyboard, I like to do that while I'm playing with my right hand, you know, because it's, well, for one, I always want to play with 2 hands because it's always a big picture context. But of course, it does make it easier if I will record a bass line and then play piano with 2 hands. So the project that I was able to be in a producer role with Barbara Parker, another local artist, I decided, I was making the decisions, and that studio did not have a piano. I had to use a keyboard. And of course, it wasn't a solo piano project, so I'm not as particular about that. But instead of hiring a bass player, we had me record my left hand with the guitar player. We brought a drummer in later, which wasn't the initial plan. It was just the guitar player and I. And I really worked on that. And if you were to listen to that, and you may be able to find some of that online, and I should have looked for a track to link in to the comments. You've got it to the point where you can't tell it's a bass player. It's my left hand, you know. And that, of course, I could have had a bass player live in the room. It could have happened. So it's not really deception. It's taking advantage of, you know, technology. And I'm all for that. But then again, I am an acoustic musician. So on a recording of originals that Beth did 11 years ago now, I don't think she gave me any prep. She may have warned me, but I don't know that she did. She just decided that she wanted me to do an instrumental version of one of her songs, and Beth writes wonderful songs. And so on that album called Take It From Me, which is available on streaming platforms, I'm pretty sure, there's like a reprise piano-only track at the very end. And because I'm talking about Beth, I'm going to play a little bit of Haunted, which I think I remember. Now, Inside Baseball and Too Much Information. Beth has recently changed the key that she sings Haunted in. And actually that happens over time. Keys do evolve for vocalists, and often will go down. but I still know this in the key I played it in. And it's a beautiful tune. I'm going to play it. So there. Almost remembered it. A couple of detours. If Beth is watching or sees this later, she'll hear them, but that's a cool tune. I wanted to play it. So, the other project is the big time-consuming. This is more like what a contemporary recording project is like, and we're talking expensive, many hours of studio time, and expensive studio time, hiring other musicians, arranging things, and all of that. And so now you're going to take advantage of having many tracks to have, in this case, studio musicians, a rhythm section, drummer in a box in a room, the bass player and the guitar player, because they're both electric instruments, could be in with the piano. But then singers are isolated in another room. And then what could happen, actually, the vocalist came in, Karen Somerville, it's her project, and Jerome Lester, the wonderful vocalists who sing with her. And we recorded what they call trash track vocals. They sang so we could accompany them, and then those vocals go away. Then they go in and they re-sing them. And that's just how it works. And then the engineer has all of this ability, especially separating the three of them when they sing together. Right? He has all this ability to manipulate anything he needs to manipulate. But the thing I wanted to bring up about this, and this is just something I really struggle with, and I almost never have to deal with, but I did for this recording, and I'm not sure how good I did, and that's a click track, right? And a click track is essentially a metronome ticking in your ear. And this isn't very loud, but you can hear it. And now I practice with a metronome all the time, but I practice with a metronome to help me get feels and stuff. I don't practice it to match a click track. In fact, I play on the offbeats more than the beats. And the presence of it just going like this is, you know, I'm just free floaty guy. But this is also, you know, skill sets that I just don't have, and we all have our different skill sets. I admire, truly, studio musicians and guys who can just go in and, you know, they just do whatever they need to do. Me, it's like it's all Joe all the time. I can never not be Joe. And there's advantages to that in certain circumstances and real disadvantages in others. Now, a click track is relatively new-ish in terms of its universal application in pop music. Now, you're not going to use it in jazz. You're gonna have that freedom. But pretty much anything that's produced in pop music is going to go with a click track. It sterilizes things a little bit, but if everything's uniform, it allows the engineer, let's say the bass player or the piano player, let's say me, played a funny phrase here, right? But that phrase is repeated somewhere else. He could go grab it, as long as there's sound isolation, grab it, stick it in the place I messed up, right? And because of the click track, we're guaranteed that the tempos are going to match up. Without the click track, they're not. And so the click track gives more options to the engineer. So, is speeding up or slowing down, but usually speeding up, a bad thing? No. Not in the recording studio where you want to manipulate things like that. Because it happens all the time. Like every tune I play. And sometimes it's noticeable, but when you're in the moment with it, you just travel with it. Now, a real good example, which I didn't realize until I listened to this tune like all the way to the end and then started it again, and it was like half the tempo it started with, is Tracy Chapman, I think. Give me one reason. You listen to the studio recording of that, and it's like, you know, way faster at the end than it is in the beginning. And it's, and you don't notice because it's just part of that, you know, energy of the thing. So I had an experience in one of my recordings, and I'm going to try to link this in the comments later. Either the entire recording of YouTube post or this song. It was a project called He's Steppin' Out, and it was a project that I did a rhythm section with. Had a couple of rhythm sections. And so we did 2 takes of this tune that was swinging, and we sped up both times. Noticeably sped up. But we were happy with one half of one of the band tracks and the other half of the other band tracks. Now, this is where the engineer would say, man, if you only did it on a click track, it wouldn't have worked. We wouldn't have been able to well, it wouldn't work for me anyway. But lo and behold, we actually sped up at exactly the same rate, at exactly the same place. And the engineer was able to take the splice, put them together, and we had sped up the same amount, and it was seamless. I can't even tell you where it is anymore. I think I know. I just listened to it like yesterday, and that was like the act of God right there, you know. So that's not something you can typically do. So I'm going to post that tune. It's called I Want to Know. And because I'm telling you it speeds up, you'll notice. And if you don't notice something speeds up that you listen to, start it over. Now, of course, why am I telling you that? Because I'm giving you license to do that with me and say, man, he doubled the tempo almost. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a little bit. Part of the thing for me, and speeding up is the worst for me when things are swinging. If things are like straight 8th notes, and I'll talk about that in another stream, you know, it locks in more. But there's a certain emotional component to swinging that creates an enthusiasm. And it just so happens that the pianist that, you know, I may be most in the mold of in terms of influenced by, Dave McKenna, man, he sped up everything. and things just took off, and nobody ever cared. In fact, he wasn't called the piano player who speeds up. He was called the hardest swinging piano player ever. You know, so yeah. Let me just play a little bit, and I'm not going to try to speed up. It's just kind of a guarantee, but I'm going to allow myself to, you know, be enthused, and then see if you hear it, and I'll invite you later to compare both sides of this, and then you'll understand why I don't like click tracks. So I didn't speed up that on purpose, and it wasn't as horrible as some things I could do. But being aware of it while I'm doing it, which I'm usually not, and it's best not to be like thinking about aspects of doing something. There's its own interesting sort of dynamic for me right there. All right, so those are the current projects that are on the front burner. Others are on the back burner. Now let's go back over my own history. So I jumped on the recording thing in my 20s, and in the 1980s, independent artists pretty much entirely released cassettes. You had two choices. You had cassette tapes, and you had LPs. You had vinyl. Vinyl was really, really expensive, and cassettes were an easy in. Now, if you wanted to get radio station airplay, you typically had to press vinyl. And I don't think it's too cynical to suggest that radio stations refusing to accept cassettes, saying they couldn't play them, which of course they could. If you wanted to, buy advertising time, you sent them a cassette of the advertisement. They were happy to play it, right? But that allowed, the music industry to stay in its own bubble. But I won't go there. That is a rabbit hole. I've always been an independent musician, and I imagine I always will. I've never made an attempt to be otherwise. But I started with cassettes, and the first one I did was a cassette of hymn arrangements. This was in the 80s, before I really found my identity as just the guy who just plays where it takes him. So I was doing a thing that a lot of people were doing at the time, which was coming up with set arrangements of hymns. And then I did a couple other things, not related to that, Christmas thing, standard thing. And then the first CD, when I moved over, because those initial recordings were analog, and that's another thing. I started with this before the digital technology overtook everything. And I took my time with it, but in 2000, I started with CDs, and it's been, of course, that ever since. Initial CDs, you still release cassettes with it because people would buy them. And that was a project of hymns as well. That's a big part of my background, traditional church music, and why I will likely, until I just get so busy, and hopefully, well, I want to be busy, but anyway, that will hopefully, no. I will continue to post Sunday evening hymns. I think that's a cool thing, and I love playing them. So I thought about, what did I play on, well, that first cassette. I don't even remember how those hymns were arranged or what I did. I kind of wasn't myself. But on the one in 2000, Hymning Christian Song Improvisations, I haven't listened to it in forever. There's still hard copies. It's not digitized. I have some hard copies of it. So I remembered how I did one tune. So I'm just going to recreate that. Okay. Something like that. I think I circled the cup a little bit. So that was in 2000, and then after that, lots of CD recordings. Actually, the first CD I'm on and was a part of was a few years before with the Deery brothers. It was their first CD, and it was a joint venture. I think we call it Joe Holt Presents the Deery Brothers, and then the title underneath was Avalon, which is one of the tunes we play. And that was, again, another big recording studio, nice piano, and the whole bit. So my own history in recording is from ranging from guest tracks on a CD, coming in to play one tune, to being a sideman, being part of the band, not my project, playing a producer role or getting a producer credit, which has happened on a few occasions, but that's really not me. I mean, yeah, but in that I can see the big picture and I know what I'm shooting for. I'm not a real detail-driven guy, and again, a good producer often is a detail-driven person. So I have my own kind of unique way of getting it done. And then, of course, the solo things, and not usually leading a band. But the one exception to that, and I brought this up, was the He's Stepping Out recording. I'm going to close talking about this and play a tune from it. And the I Want to Know was part of that. This is a unique project, and I did it back in 2002. It was actually the second CD release I did. And the engineer, Chris Webb, who also engineered the Hymn and Christian Song Improvisations, and I still talk about it, that I may go like remaster, re-record some tracks and fix some things and put that out there. He's Stepping Out is on streaming platforms like on Spotify, so you can find it. And it was all original tunes, started with all tunes I wrote for a children's choir in the 80s when I was music director of the church. And it was pre-Veggie Tales, if you're aware of that, which is where a lot of the hipper children's music in church has come from. And everything to me was lame, so I started writing my own stuff, and it just became this thing. And eventually, years later, I did a recording project with it, and I actually sang. And I justified it by saying this isn't real singing. And it's more than about that. So what I worked out with Chris is saying, we're going to get to the point where the singing doesn't get in the way or distract. Actually, in some cases it does, and that's what I'll re-record. But that was, of course, something. It was my project, so I was the producer, obviously. And I can't remember. I think we gave Chris a producer credit as well. Oh, since this is going to be the last thing I play, I'll tell you a funny story from that. If you find that recording on a streaming platform and you go to the cut, I Want a Peanut Butter Sandwich. Woo! So the tunes that the kids would do in church became like theatrical events with scripts and parts and costumes and the whole thing and acting roles, right? And so how I recreated that was to have like a Vince Guaraldi feel rhythm section, and then had a comedian play off of me. Comedian is Jimmy Lawler, who's the drummer in the Deery Brothers band. And now that I'm going to be doing some more work with the band, I'll be in his presence again, which is always a trip. He's the one who said to me on the dance floor, well, just think, Joe, you're the last musician to ever play for Cab Calloway, and walked away. You know, that's Jimmy, right? But the guy's like a comic genius, right? And so at the end of I Want a Peanut Butter Sandwich, and Chris Babb had his recording studio equipment in his basement. So it was a basement studio in his house. We actually recorded with a live piano at a remote location at a church. And then we did the rest in his house. And so if you hear the lyrics in the song, you'll understand there's different characters that are played out, including a little baby and a mother and a father. So I just said to Jimmy, you know, as this song ends, and I was just having this thought, we should see if we can create a dinner table scene, right? Where the feeling is that the mic is being panned around the dinner table, and then you're hearing all the characters discuss and have conversation going around. And Jimmy was all those characters. And of course, this is a multi-tracking thing too, as you can imagine. And I didn't know what that would be like, but I trusted Jimmy. But I didn't even get to finish the explanation. And he had invited himself to run upstairs, get in the kitchen, and grab a bunch of silverware. And I'm like staring at Chris like, what's going on? And he comes down with like a plate and some silverware. He says, I'm ready. This is pure. And so Chris must have recorded 7, 8, or 9 tracks, maybe 10, just all on top of each other. Starting with him clinking the silverware and then gargling, then burping, and then being all these characters. And, you know, some recording award, a Grammy or something, Jimmy should win for that scene. So I'm hipping you to that if you want to check it out. This is one I can do by myself. And this is just, if I have to, when I used to do a lot of church concerts, and I had to sing one from it, I would gave myself permission to warble this one. Let me see. Got so many things going on, I forget what, what it sounds like. I forget what the intro was. Oh well. A man with his spouse came to build himself a house. Didn't care about the ground, he put it on. He didn't plan ahead, he built it on the sand instead. He didn't know that soon it would be gone. He never listened when they told him that the sand would never hold him and his house that he had planned for years and years. But still he was surprised the day he saw it with his eyes, when a gust of wind blew all his dreams to tears. And the walls fell down and the windows hit the ground. On the pavement they were scattered and the chandelier was shattered. It happened very suddenly, was over in a wink. The table and the lamp had fallen in the kitchen sink. The bread and the butter went flying in the gutter. And the fruit and the veggies fell all over Dad and Mother. You'd never know that anybody lived at that address. It was just one big mess. Man up the street, he had a house so clean and neat because it sat upon a big block of cement. He believed that when they told him that the sand would never hold him, no violent storm will hardly leave a dent. When Jesus gives a lesson, you had better pay attention. It's the smartest thing that you will ever do. When you build your life on Him, He's your rock and foundation, so you'll never say that this happened to you. But the walls fell down and the windows hit the ground. On the pavement they were scattered and the chandelier was shattered. It happened very suddenly, was over in a wink. The table and the lamp had fallen in the kitchen sink. The bread and the butter went flying in the gutter. The fruit and the veggies fell all over Dad and Mother. You never know that anybody lived at that address. It was just one big mess. So there, for what it's worth. Thanks for being with me tonight. You'll notice perhaps a support link in the description, especially going forward when lots of other things are going to be, demanding my attention. It's going to be, well, it is helpful, of course, and necessary, and and I'm grateful for it. I can't come up with the words. If you're willing to support my little venture here, the support link on my website will give you different options: the PayPal tip jar, my mailing address, and the Patreon, which I'd ask you to take a look at, is just a version of the tip jar, but I would send you some exclusive content each month, just kind of like an inside thing as a thank you if you're willing to do that. So look for some announcements coming in the next few weeks. Cool things are happening. I hope to be able to continue this, help spread the word if you enjoy this, and maybe like a music student who might be interested in some of these. Oh, I wanted to tell you that I'm getting the website kind of caught up. All of these streams for Inside the Process are listed on the Inside the Process page. They're not all posted yet as far as the backup copies on YouTube, but they will be. I'm posting every one to YouTube, and I'm just a couple of weeks behind, but most of them are there. And it's much easier to share and deal with that on YouTube. YouTube is designed for that more than Facebook. Facebook is more of a in-the-moment experience kind of thing, and not primarily a video platform, although they have videos. And I'm also posting select Inside the Process hours on the Escape from Home hours on the Escape from Home page of the website. Check out all of that. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. This was fun. I'll listen and see how big of a mess I made just now in the last hour. Thanks again.